You're good to go.
Okay. I just want to remind everyone to mute your screens and take your video off the screens as well, so that we don't have any disturbance over the interview. And hope you enjoy the show.
Come on, Mama.
I don't think everyone's muted there yet.
We're getting there.
Okay. All right, I'm going to start. Hello, my name is Eric Dirks from the Illinois Dressage and Combined Training Association, and today we are going to be speaking with Denny Emerson and his newly released book, Begin and Begin Again, The Bright Optimism of Reinventing Life with Horses. Anybody logged on to this interview will get 20% off of Denny's new book and or any other book at Trafalgar Square Books, graciously offered by the team at Trafalgar Square Books. Without further ado, let me introduce Denny Emerson, a member of gold medal team the gold medal team winning team in the 1974 World Championship, the only equestrian to have won an international gold medal in eventing and a Tevis Cup buckle in endurance. Inducted into 3 Halls of Fame: USEA Hall of Fame, the Vermont Academy Athletic Hall of Fame, the Dartmouth College Athletic Hall of Fame. In 2000, he was named one of the 50 most influential horsemen of the 20th century by the Chronicle of the Horse. He is also the author of How Good Riders Get Good and Know Better to Do Better. He is a true steward to equestrian sport and horses in general. Welcome back, Denny Emerson.
Thank you.
So I just want to hear where you've been these past winter months and what you've been up to.
Well, I've been hauling a hay cart through the mud to hay 4 horses. We're in Vermont. We're living up here full time now. We're selling the place in North Carolina. It got to the point where especially our family's all up here. So we're in just one location trying to consolidate. Been riding a lot, rode 3 today. Still at it.
Are you just as busy teaching as well?
I'm not teaching. That part I've retired from.
Okay.
Trying to stay retired from that. If I don't get time to do my own horses at some point, I won't. So.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, Begin and Begin Again. What is the meaning behind your new release and what inspired you to write this book?
Well, I think that what really the thing that triggered this book, I had a friend named Ken Ferran, who was my roommate at Dartmouth College in the early 1960s. And Ken had a pretty interesting career. He graduated he was a 2nd generation immigrant from Ireland. His father was a railroad engineer in Long Island who used to get up at 4 a.m. to go in and out from Long Island to New York. And Ken was a pretty hard driving guy, and his Dartmouth tuition was paid for by the Marines. And so when I met him in the fall of '59, he had just come back from Quantico, our freshman year. And when we graduated in '63, immediately, he got his commission and right away was sent to Vietnam. And he was on the GI Bill after he got out. He was a captain and a company commander, and he went to Cornell Law School. Then, still on the GI Bill, he went to Harvard and got some kind of a law degree there. Then he got a fellowship at Cambridge University in England, at which point his father said, "Ken, you have to get a real job." He said, I was in the Marines, and he said, that doesn't count. And anyway, Ken had, over the years, he struggled with cancer. It started with one type of cancer, and then he seemed to afflict that, and it went on. And by the time of our 50th reunion, which was in 2013, he was in very bad shape, but he got on the train down in Washington. I picked him up in White River Junction. He was doing dialysis, and he never complained about anything. And I was talking to him about, I'd had an accident when I was just turning 70 in 2011, and I broken my neck, which sort of ended my eventing career. And I was talking about having to make all these changes. And he said, Denny, a change is not a retreat. And
That's rich.
that's pretty amazing, you know. And I thought to myself, boy, if Ken, with what he's dealing with, can think that way, I'm not going to be complaining about my little troubles. And so then I thought, all right, it's inevitable that we change. You know, nobody is the same at 58 as they were at 18 or whatever. And I think you either adapt or you sort of get out, you know. And it occurred to me that I'd never seen any of this written about. The idea that you can do one thing and you can do it at a certain level, and then you can change levels. You can go up a level, you can come down a level, you can go sideways, you can have new concepts, you can have an absolutely new aspect of the horse experience. You can go from being a rider to a trainer to a teacher to somebody who writes books about horses or takes movies of horses. And so I started to talk to a lot of people, and I said, you know, and it's, once I started to talk to people, I heard hundreds of stories of people who had, you know, they had ridden when they were 14, 15, 16, 17, then they hadn't ridden again for 30 years. And then their daughter started riding, and then they started riding again. And now they're, then they bought a horse, and now at age 60, they're back in it more than they were when they were 20. So I started to write it down. And so that's sort of how this came about.
I read your book, and it's truly inspiring to make change, because a lot of people can get so caught up into the monotony and keep going after that same proverbial goal. And we talked briefly about athletes, that what do they do when they retire? Can we cover a little bit of that too? We were talking about how some of these athletes, that maybe they've done something for so long, they hit this moment where they hit depression because they don't know what to do.
There was a guy named Bart Giamatti who was commissioner of baseball, and he had been president of Yale University, and he recognized that when professional athletes get to be, and they retire early, 35, 40. I mean, Tom Brady is probably the, you know, the one example of one that never will retire. But most of them, by the time they're still quite young, are no longer the sort of the center of attention. And for many of them, Giamatti recognized they went into tremendous depression. A lot of them started drinking, doing drugs, gained a lot of weight, got lethargic. And he wanted to figure out ways to sort of help segue these guys from one type of career into another way of dealing with their lives. And I think that, you know, Eric, you and I have seen a lot of people who have been big time riders. They get to a certain point, they stop riding, and then they just quit. You never see them again. When they stop competing, they stop riding. They give up their interest in horses because they weren't able to go sideways or think of something else to do. So I think it's very real. Riding allows you, you know, I remember somebody saying one time, the youth of the horse gives wings to the aging rider. And I think that's true up to a point, but at some point, you know, you're not 17 anymore. So, you know, it changes.
Absolutely. Well, that brings me to some of the chapters that you have in this book. Like you said, you've talked to many different people and reinventing themselves with horses to real life stories. And could you tell us briefly a little bit about the chapters in this book and why you covered these bases?
Well, I think everybody begins at some point, whether you're 6 and, are in an up-down lesson program somewhere, or whether you're, starting at 50, like my friend Walt Gervais, 55, after his wife had died, and he was looking for something to occupy his time, and he started riding at 55 and wound up doing his first 3-day at Bromont when he was 75. And so I think, you start somewhere. So obviously I said, begin the first time. And then I talk about, you can, if you have been doing one thing and you want to try something else, you can do it. I mean, for example, I did a lot of things. I started out with a paint pony doing Gymkhana. Then I get into Morgan's. Then I did the 100-mile trail ride when I was 15 at GMHA. Then I got hooked on eventing. Then I did that for 50 years. But I also did polo. We played polo at Bob Lamb's farm when I was like 22 or 3. Show jumping, dressage, timber racing a little bit. Back to Morgan's. The Tevis Cup, doing all that endurance stuff with Arabians. So I mean, you don't have to get locked into any one particular thing. I mean, it's a pretty big, smorgasbord out there of, I think of it as, almost a mosaic, of the horse world, and it's got little bits and pieces, and there's all those pieces that interlock to make the whole, but every one of those pieces is a valid piece. And I mean, I have chapters in there. Ashley Newhoff, my friend who's a big time photographer down in Wellington, that's how she gets her horse fix. Leslie Ellis is a saddle maker, Stackhouse Saddles. I mean, there's, you can do anything you want. You just have to decide you want to do it and just try it. You're not stuck. You're only stuck because you allow yourself to be stuck.
Well, I like your side notes. You see here. Here you have the starting over stories from rewriters, and you have them going throughout your book of just everyday people, how they got back into horses, along with your main storyline of your experiences in each chapter. And Denny, I really consider you to be the king of storytelling. And a lot of humor, a lot of experience, very rich wealth of knowledge displayed in here. Oh, there, I meant to share that screen. So right here, you got starting over stories from rewriters. Tell us, how did you come across some of these individuals that you got these sidebar stories from?
So I have a big Facebook page thing. When I broke my neck in 2011 and I was in a halo, I was bored, and I started to do this Tamarack Hill Farm Facebook page. And I didn't know anything about computers, and I just sort of started fiddling around with it. And it grew. I think I started out with like 500, likes. And then it got to 1,000 likes, and then it got to 5,000 likes, and now I think it's like 103,000 likes. But I started to, and I'd put things up on my Facebook page, and people would comment on them. And so
Lori Mayfield, excuse me, just one. Could Lori Mayfield take herself off of Merrifield, take herself off of video, please?
And audio.
Audio and visual, please. Thank you.
So
Sorry.
So one of the most popular ones I did, I was talking about this whole rewriter thing, because that's a thing now. Somebody's not on mute.
There we go.
So we started talking about rewriters, people that rode and then had a gap, and it could be a 1-year gap, or it could be a 20 or 30, or some cases 40-year gap between when they first rode and when they came back to riding. And so those were some of the responses to that Facebook sort of chat that we did. And so Martha Cook, my editor at Trafalgar Books, said, you know, why don't we start to just make a list of them? And then I sent them a list of about 25 or 30, and they picked, I don't know, however many there are in there, 15 or so, to be little sidebars of actual stories from actual real people who, you know, talk about their experience getting back into it after a gap.
Yeah, and it's just inspiring to make change, because these are everyday people making change, which is wonderful. Let me find another point. You had also new beginnings pieces in there. You selected a few horsewomen and horsemen that had new beginnings. So there's this side stories of their stories.
Yeah, like Stacy Westfall, you know, I knew who Stacy Westfall was. I'd seen, you know, videos of her doing her bareback stuff at the big, you know, trade shows and such. And she was in Maine, and I got a call from her. She said, I'm on my way back to Ohio. Can I stop at your farm and get a jumping lesson? And I said, sure. I mean, and so she came, and if you don't know her, she is a really great rider, horseman, trainer. And she got on Tense, this young horse jumper that I had, and you'd think she was, you know, Bruce Davidson. She was just a natural. She could just do it. And she said when she was in school, all she ever wanted was to be a professional horsewoman and have a string of horses. And she got married, she had a couple of kids, and she had everything that she always wanted. And she said every night she cried herself to sleep. And she said something was missing in her life. And what she realized, she was in a competition somewhere and she dropped a rein and she couldn't get it back because it was dangling, I guess. And so she just rode the horse through body language, and the horse, and everybody was cheering and everything. And so that changed. She thought, you know what, that was fun. I'm gonna pursue that. And she said she realized that what she was missing in the grim, dogged day-to-day drill of the business of riding, she had lost the joy of riding. And when she got that back, you know, everything changed for her. And I think a lot of people do that. You know, they get onto this, I call it the gerbil wheel, or the, you know, the marmot wheel, you know, how they run,
Yeah.
you know, and, you know, you and I, Eric, were on that. You go from Radnor to Chesterland to, you know, the next event to the next event to the next event, and you can't get off, you know, and the faster you run, and you're never good enough, because it doesn't matter how many times you win, there's always something next week. And I think a lot of people start out loving horses, and then they get into something, whether they think they're doing it for, because I don't know why, you know, I don't know how it's easy to get trapped into the, you know, the gerbil wheel of day to day to day to day with, and you lose the fun.
Well, until you hit like a rock bottom all of a sudden to invoke change. So you have a lot of beginnings to begin to do change, but how did you come across change in your life? Whether there catastrophic moments, or how did you discover all these different like disciplines to go from the world championships to do endurance riding?
Well, you know, part of that was
looking for change.
Well, you know, I think part of it was, you know, I started eventing in '62, and my first event was at prelim, which was probably back then, that was what, 60 years ago. It's probably more like what training would be today, but it was more open and flowing and galloping, and the fences were, I think cross country was much less technical than it is today. And so then I think in '71, I went advanced on a horse called Cat. And then I got Victor Dakin, you know, went to the World Championships, really got into it. And I evented at advanced for, I think, something like from '71 till '99, about 38 years. And then I thought, and I always was sort of a goal setter. So I thought, you know what? I want to compete in eventing at prelim or higher for 50 straight years. And that's a hard damn goal, because I got hurt 2 times in there. But anyway, that happened in 2011. In June and July, I broke my neck.
Oh my gosh.
At a little novice event. The horse stopped at a ditch and I did, one of those like Chris Reeve straight, head plant, but I didn't rotate it enough to get paralyzed. But, so that ended the eventing. I mean, I could have kept going, but the doctor said, you were lucky, don't do it again. And I said, what, don't ride again? He said, no, don't break your neck again. So, but I'd always been a Morgan kid. I mean, I grew up, that was my first type of horse. I always liked Morgans. And so I thought, well, you know what? I'm 70, I better get back into Morgans. And that was 11 years ago. So then I thought, well, one thing I can do is the Morgan breed was sort of in decline. They had gotten down at one point to under 1,000 new foals registered a year. And I thought, what can I do? Maybe I can help support the Morgan horse by getting involved with that. But the endurance thing I could do concurrently with my eventing. Once I stopped going advanced in eventing and I was just going prelim, then I had time to sort of get an Arabian. I was, Lana DuPont Wright, the first one to ride in the Olympics. She was, I think it was 1998. I was just talking with her at Fair Hill. And I said, so Lana, I hear you're an endurance rider now. And she said, yeah, have you ever done it? And I said, no, I've done 100-mile trail rides, 40 years ago, but I've never done endurance. And she said, well, I've got an extra horse for this 100-mile race down in North Carolina. Do you want to ride him? And I said, I didn't know what the hell, right? I said, sure, right? And then I sort of forgot about it. And then I get this, and it was over Thanksgiving weekend. I'm down in North Carolina and I get this email from Lana. I'll be stopping your place in 3 days. I hope you're ready. And so, have you ever done a 100-mile ride?
No, but I read your story and you described it so well.
Oh my God.
I was like in your shoes.
Yeah, so this 14 one-hand little Arabian, right? Zion. So we start out, it's pouring, I've got a cold, I'm sick, it's pouring rain, and 100 miles doesn't sound like, I don't know if it sounds like a lot or not, but it was, and so we start trotting, and it was all cotton fields, flat, trot. So I'm going about 25 miles, I'm still okay. 30 miles, 40 miles, my knees start to hurt. How did this happen?
Is this the little horse right here?
No, Zion is a little gray horse.
Oh, okay.
50 miles, I was done, and I had 50 miles to go. And so now eventually it gets pouring rain. It's cold. I'm shivering. I have hypothermia, and we've got 12 miles to go. And it's pitch black, and we're lost in this cotton field. And I'm riding with these 2 ladies, these 2 tough old ladies, and I say the one thing you can't say in endurance. I said, well, the bloom is off this rose. And one of them goes, well, they wouldn't call it endurance if it wasn't hard. And the other one goes, the biggest compliment you can pay a endurance rider is to call them a boiled owl. That's the toughest thing to eat in the Maine woods, is a boiled owl. And you are not one.
That's excellent.
Anyway, I finished at like 1 o'clock in the morning. We'd started at like 6:30 in the morning, and I couldn't even move the next day. I was seized up, right? I was foundered. And anyway, that's how I got started in that. And then I thought, well, if I'm going to do this, I better aim for the Tevis Cup, because that's the hardest one. And so then
before you get onto the Tevis Cup, this was my favorite chapter. Begin to try the impossible. And what really shocked me was your life before the World Championships. With Vector Dagan, you started out as a school teacher and a real estate broker,
Yeah,
and then you go to the World Championships, get a clean round, bring home the team gold, and life from there changed.
yeah. Well, the thing, Eric, I was working at a Morgan farm, the Lippet farm, Green Mountain Stock Farm, in the summer between my junior and senior year at sophomore and junior year at college. And they were having a thing down in Hamilton, Mass called the Wofford Cup. And it was an event, a 3-day event. I didn't know what a 3-day event was. I was working, I was a sort of a lowly sub-assistant trainer. I was 19, about to turn 20. So I went down to watch it. And it was at Groton House. And I saw, and Mike Plum was in it, Mike Page, Mr. Plum, Mike's father. I can't remember who all was in it, but and I thought, I can't do that. I thought I was this greatest rider. I couldn't conceive of anybody being as good as me. And suddenly I'm watching this thing and they're doing all this impossible stuff, jumping into the Ipswich River, going down these slides, So I said, I want to do that.
Yeah.
So I went back.
So what year was that, the Wofford Club?
61.
61.
That was in 1961.
Okay.
So that was what, 61 years ago. Yeah. So I asked this friend of mine, how do I jump? Art Titus, the trainer at the Morgan farm, he said, you put up a fence 1 foot high and you jump it till you get bored, then you raise it. So a friend of mine knew about a horse at the Schurinks Dornhoff farm. They had a 5-year-old thoroughbred for sale. So I sold my Morgan, bought a thoroughbred and started jumping. And then they said, well, you've got to do dressage. And I said, what's that? And I still say, what's that? So, but I knew how to sit the trot because I had a bareback pony from the time I was like 10 till I got my first pony 70 years ago in 62. And so I could sit the trot, and, everybody in those days, they wanted to get them on the bit. So you hauled their head in, their hocks are probably 6 feet out behind them, but so you'd be riding around. I'd look over at Reed Perkins. My horse flexed. Yep. It's mine. Yep. We knew nothing. Right. So then I thought, well, if I'm going to get on the US team, I better go advanced. So, and Lighting Magic was, he was a little bit of a knee hanger. He was a good game horse, but I didn't think he was going to go jump those big advanced fences. So I was teaching school in Northampton, Mass. And this guy where I boarded my horse, had this gray horse that was a barrel racer from Oklahoma. His name was Cat. And he could really jump. And I bought him for $800. And the problem with Cat was he had been a barrel racer, so he thought he was going to get whipped. And in eventing in those days, you took your helmet off and you put it down by your knee to salute. And when you take your hat off to drop it at A, enter working trot, X, halt, salute. When I put my hand down, he would wheel. I remember one time General Burton was at C and I was saluting at E. Anyway, so I didn't do too well in dressage, but he could jump the jump. So I started to go advanced. And then I got the chance to buy Victor Dakin, he had not made the Canadian team because he was not good in dressage particularly, but he was a superstar cross country. And I went to the first Ledyard in 73, had a couple of quits with him. I didn't know how to ride him. I was sort of setting him up too much. And then over the year, I realized that with Victor, you just put your leg on and went at it, and he'd set himself up and jump up. And from that time on, I went for 5 years and he never had a stop or a fault cross country.
Did Jack LeGoff discover you then?
No, he didn't want me because I was already married and had a kid.
Oh.
And but I did well enough at the selection trials in 74 that he took 9 riders to Hamilton. And I realized I was sort of number 9. Wow. And he was going to put 6 horses on the plane to go to England, and then 4 to be on the team and 3 to count. And so, I I guess for whatever, Victor didn't have any problems. You know, he put up these big show jumping courses on the lawn there, and Victor would always go clean. And then we'd have cross country schools at Ledyard, and Victor would always go clean. And so I got on the plane, and then I got on the team of 4, and then he was one of the 3 clean rounds that our team had.
Wow.
You know, so it was like,
Well, and then the book.
So that, you know, you know how you talk about pivotal moments.
Yeah.
So, you know, that cross-country round of Burley, I had never seen anything like Burley. I'd gone to around Ledyard, which was big, but nothing like Burley 74. And so, you know, I think back and I think, how did that happen? You know, have you ever done something like that? You've accomplished something and you look back and you think, did that really happen to me? Did I actually do that? Because, you know, Eric, there's so many places, one little glance off, one little missed distance, one little something, right?
Yeah.
But that particular day, everything just clicked, click, click, click. And then, so then we get the gold medal, and then, you know, then you get famous, and then you're set up so that you can become a teacher. And then that 1 hour, I remember it was almost 18 miles that day. It was back in the long format day. And I think we rode for 1 hour and 10 minutes, and that 1 hour and 10 minutes just flipped the switch that changed, you know, how I was able to spend the rest of my life.
What was the flight home like? Were you contemplating in your mind going, well, I guess I want to do this?
Well, no, I mean, no, you know, it doesn't, you can't even believe it for a while. It doesn't sink in.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, did that really happen?
Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty amazing.
Well, you described the course in your book so well. It's worth the read. And I just hear your voice all the way through it. And even to the last jump, which was the chicaner, and you knew you were heading home, but you know, that's when bad things happen, when you get complacent. And your description of the course is beautiful. And I thought Burley was tough. And then you get into the chapter of the Tevis buckle.
Oh man,
I thought Burley was tough, but when you start describing,
no, it's different. They're different. You know, the Tevis 3-day eventing takes a lot of skill.
Oh yeah.
The Tevis isn't so much a test of skill, it's a test of, can you hack it? Yeah. And the biggest mistake I made at the Tevis Cup was waiting till I was 63 to do it. I should have done it when I was, you know, 23 or 33 or 43 or 53, because you're trotting downhill. I rode 21 hours. I started at 5:45 in the morning and I finished at 4 something and I was 75th out of 250. It was the 50th anniversary ride, so it was packed with riders. Everybody wanted to do it that year, and what happened with me, my knees started to ache, you know, like these stabbing pains, you know, Advil didn't even begin to do it, you know. And so what you do is, it's psychological. You can't, with those long endurance races, you can't think, I've got 74 miles to go, because you'll die, you know, it's too daunting. So you think, I've got 11 miles till the vet hold. And then I've got 8 miles to such and such a vet check. And then there were 9 vet checks, and there were 2 1-hour holds. And about the last third of the ride, it's pitch black, you know, you're riding at night, which is just as well, because you can't see that you're going to fall off the edge of the cliffs. And yeah, you really should do that, Eric. I mean, it would be good for you to.
I don't know.
How old are you? You're not 63 yet. Don't be a wuss. Get an Arabian. I'm
sure those endurance ladies are thinking of you a lot different.
Yeah, see if you're a boiled owl boy. Yeah.
Well, and then you also talking about we talk about all these the riding that you've accomplished, but you've also given so much to the breeding industry as well. You know, being on this, having so many breeding stallions. How did you get into the breeding side of things?
Well, when I was 17, I bought Lippert Raymond, who was a Morgan stallion. I always was interested in pedigrees, and his stud fee was $50, and I got one mare that first summer, a Pinto mare, and she got loose because my friend Ted Nibley, he charged. I didn't know how to hold the stallion from charging her, and he charged her, and Ted dropped the shank of the mare, and I dropped the shank of the stallion, and the mare and the stallion went off down the road, and they were disappeared. And this was in Reading, Vermont. And then we were yelling at each other. Why did you let the mare go? Why'd you let the stallion go? Then we hear this brum, 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 and then they come charging back, and Lippet Raymond gets her pinned in the corner and breeds her with no help from anybody except two teenage boys yelling at each other. So I got interested with, and so anyway, so then the mare wasn't in foal, right? So the guy called me the next spring and he said, you know, the mare's not in foal. And my vet checked her. And I said, well, bring her back. And this time we were not going to mess around. So we had her twitched and hobbled, and the mare got bred, and he took her home, and he called me out 10 days later and he said, we just had a filly.
She was pregnant
from the year before.
Oh my word.
Anyway, so I'd always been interested in breeding, starting way back in 1958 or 9. And so then I got a thoroughbred stallion, Corbuff, and then another and another. I think I had like 18 stallions over the years, a whole ton of them.
Yeah. You know,
Yeah.
I was just talking with somebody earlier, you know, I'm a thoroughbred fan myself, but the odds of these horses that you pick up off the track nowadays is 20%, whether they have a leg injuries or back trouble. And
Yeah, well, I read
thoroughbred is such a keen breed, and their racing career starts so early. It's almost advantageous finding thoroughbred blood that is bred without doing the racing yet. What are your thoughts behind that?
Well, you know, one of the things that you read in the, like I get the Blood Horse magazine, and there are quite a few articles about hoof quality. And they said that what has happened with the emphasis on early speed, precocious speed, 2- and 3-year-old speed, is that they breed for that, whether or not those stallions were particularly sound and, you know, had long careers. And I don't know about you guys, but we've had a number of thoroughbreds whose feet sort of biodegraded in the summer.
Absolutely.
You know, like my Morgans, you know, it's almost like you could ride them barefoot over rocks. But, you know, the thoroughbreds, you change their shoes and they're tender for 3 days afterwards. So I think if you can find a stallion that raced 50 or 60 times, like Loyal Pal, that one horse I had, he raced 124 times, and Silver Comet raced 85 times, and a Reputed Testimony raced 55 or 60 times. I mean, you know, you don't have to, if you find a horse that could really got hammered on and stayed sound,
Yeah.
you know, that's what I look for.
Wow. Okay.
What's that old ad? Takes a licking and keeps on ticking.
Yeah. You know, you wrote 2 other books, How Good Riders Get Good and Know Better to Do Better. Where would you say this book fits into your trilogy, basically?
Well, I think I wrote a backwards trilogy in a way. I think How Good Riders Get Good, those weren't really good riders in a way that I interviewed or that were interviewed. They were sort of really top riders, you know, BC Madden. I mean, people like that. And what I realized later is that 99% of us are not, that's not sort of what our objectives are.
Right.
It's not real. I mean, it is real, but it isn't real, you know? And then the middle one that I wrote, Know Better to Do Better, I grew up I got my first pony in 1952 in Greenfield, Massachusetts. And if you think about that, anybody 53 years old or older had been born in the 1800s, right?
This is my challenge.
Yeah.
And they had grown up at a time when horses were used for everything. And horses, you didn't have a, quote, relationship with your horse, you know, with those guys. A horse was a utility animal. And
Right.
I can remember being taught, show that horse who's boss, don't let him get away with that. You know, it was kind of a rough and ready, adversarial, confrontational mindset. When you're a 10, 11, 12-year-old kid and these adults are telling you this is how you do it,
Yeah.
you sort of imbibe that. At least I did. And I think a lot of people in my generation did. And, you know, today, when you look at, you know, Charlotte Desjardins or, you know, Carl Hester or some of these riders, they are very, very, and Klaus Balkenhol, they're very gentle, they're very thorough, they're very kind, they're very incremental. And it took me way too long, Eric, to sort of change my ways. And so part of begin and begin again isn't just about beginning a new type of riding. It's a new attitude towards how to train, how to ride, how to do it correctly without being too strong and too, you know, that the horse, it's, you know, one of the mistakes that so many people make is this horse won't do what I want, therefore the horse is being bad. You know, it's like boom, boom. It's such an easy way to go. And, you know, this horse won't do what I want. Yeah, because his saddle doesn't fit, because he's not fit enough, he's getting tired, because he doesn't understand what you're asking him, because he's got ulcers, because he, you know what I mean? There's a million reasons.
Yeah.
But it's so easy to just go, well, he doesn't do what I want him to do because he's disobeying me. And I mean, you've got to change that. If you're ever going to get any good in this game, you've got to change those bad attitudes.
Well, you hit something there too, that when today, I think we have just the, we also have a competitor out there, competitors that are also just as driven to compete. And so if the horse doesn't meet up to that standard to put that score up, they write it off and get on to the next horse that they're going to get along with. And it creates quite a field of shallow horsemen. And I find even doing some of these interviews, when you have competitors that go, we learn to compete. And there's this missing, for me, it's this missing depth that's behind the companionship, the life with horses. And your life with horses is very rich, that we discover that you got to share in this book. And I think we come to a point that becomes a boiling point, like we said, that we fall off the wheel, and then we find the value back in horses when we discovered when we were little.
Yeah, well, you know, you've probably seen that meme. I mean, I think we all have, about, it shows a little kid with her pony. And then it shows some other person having a bad wreck over some big advanced cross-country course. And then the question is, how did it happen that this child who started out loving her pony more than anything in the world, how did it end up that she could put her horse for her own glory in this much jeopardy for the ribbon or something like that? You know, what changed? What changed in that kid's head that she would then jeopardize her horse's well-being? And one of the things that I think some of these sports have to take a harder look at themselves is, I mean, do we have to ask them to go that far toward the outer limits of their abilities to prove how good you and I are? And I don't think we do. I think we have to figure out ways to test without having it such that if it goes wrong, the horse could have a rotational fall, break its leg, have a smash, you know, a crash. I'm not talking about the injuries to the people. I'm talking about just the wear and tear on the horses. You know, are we humane? Are we horsemen? a horseman is, I was taught, there were years that I didn't really act what I knew, but I was taught a real horseman, horsewoman is somebody who always puts in an educated way the best interests of the horse first. And to run a horse till it breaks down, that's not, doing that.
Well, I like the backside of your horse says a lot of it. Much like my riding career over the past 70 years, full of zigs and zags, twists and turns, this book is not one that has a beginning, a middle, or an end. This book is about the many years we can start out with horses, each one as valid as another. So as long as we don't hurt the horse, and then as our circumstances change, how we can reinvent or revisit that association. Some of us find one path and follow it for a lifetime, while others, and I am one, change and change again. And I just have to compliment you on your changes and how you inspire others to change as well.
I think everybody has their own journey, and but I don't, if going back to what Ken Ferran said to me, change is not a retreat. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with being at a certain level and saying, I'm not comfortable at this level anymore. I'm not comfortable with what I'm having to ask my horse to do at this level. Or, another one is, you get hurt. It's easy to be one of those, I fell off and got hurt and I got back on. And well, it doesn't always work that way. A lot of times I was thinking that today, I was riding on ice and I had a friend who had a horse. She's a good rider. She was riding across a road where there was sheet ice and the horse slipped and fell and crushed her leg, broke her knee. And that was like 20 years ago. And she said, I cannot be on a horse on ice without just sitting there freezing up. It's a certain type of PTSD, post-traumatic stress. She revisits that accident when she's in that situation. And, I think there's a lot of people that have had accidents, maybe they've had illness, they're not in shape that they were when they were younger. And, they get on a horse and the horse starts to act up and they feel themselves starting to freeze up. And, you have to sort of give yourself the latitude to sort of slow down, back up, go to a different place in your riding. I mean, a change is not a retreat unless you feel that it is.
Denny, you brought up a really a good topic that's dear to my heart. There's a lot of times that we don't even know the actions that we're doing due to performance anxiety that actually don't play in the horse's best favor. And sometimes if we slow our brain down to the more empathetic approach to the horse, we can reel ourselves back into the present moment and realize what our actions are doing at that present moment.
And who's to say you have to keep riding to stay involved with horses?
Absolutely.
Right? If you've been hurt or if you've been sick or if you're older or you've gotten scared and you want to be involved with horses in some other way, that you should do that. To me, everybody sort of thinks everybody's watching me, everybody cares what I do. You know what? They don't give a darn what you do, right? No. The only person that really that cares about what you do is you.
Yeah.
Even your mother doesn't care as long as you don't get hurt. You know what I mean?
My mom cares.
They might a little bit, or your best friend or something like that, but they don't, I mean, I've talked to people that go, I don't think it's dignified to go beginner novice, unless you're going at least prelim, you're not a real event rider. Who the hell gives a darn, right?
I know.
Right? Nobody. If you're happy going beginner novice or elementary or grasshopper and you're having fun and your horse sure as hell doesn't want to go advanced.
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, oh, I'm wasting my horse's potential. Like the horse gets up in the morning and goes, gee, I wish I was at badminton. Right?
Yeah.
Come on, right?
Yeah,
So,
I hear you.
yeah.
Well, my mom was more concerned that whether I was going to have a glare on my head, so she told me to turn down the lighting. So
Too late for you and me, boy. Yeah.
Well, Denny, I'm sure I speak for all of us here. You're a true inspiration to the equestrian community, and wish you luck in your new beginnings to come. And I really appreciate your stewardship to the sport and to everybody involved. Again, you're an inspiration, Denny. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot, Eric. And I think it's great that you're doing this for your association. I mean,
and I would like to thank you also for joining us and being here and your sage advice. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
From IDCTA.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
Denny,
I guess.
We'll
right?
talk soon. Thank you.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.